Thank you for joining us for another Wednesday edition of Wisecrack Live. It's December 13th, and we have Marianne Williamson in the second hour with us. We have a lot to talk about in the first, and it's going to be a fun show, y'all. Michael will be with us in just a moment. If you're here, lick the stream, and I'll be back. Awesome. Glad to see so many people here so early. I see Dude Abides and Chris Maverick, Phenopticon. We got a lot of green names. Nice to see you, Eddie and Paul. We got Jared Doer here. We got Dennis Vandermeij. Julia, thanks for joining us. Thank you, Darren. Shout out to all the new subs who are joining us for the first time. It's going to be a big episode, so you're joining us for something special today. Just saw Godzilla -1 extraneous, and it was wonderful.
What's up, everyone? It's December 13th. It's Wisecrack Live. It's Michael Burns here with Henry. So hi to all our Wisecrack Livers, our Wisecrack Deaders, our Dead Crack Livers, our Live Crack Wanderers, our Wandering Wanderers, our Peeing Panthers, our Pantheress, Pea Pant, Little Boys, our big friends, our small friends, our large friends, our small friends with big minds and big friends with small minds, tall ones, short ones, round ones, square ones, everyone who shows up. Everyone is welcome at this party. Bring whatever you got to the potluck because Mom and Dad, we're eating today. It's Wisecrack Live. Happy to see all of you. It might look a little bit different. We got a little bit of a different setup today. Now, one of the reasons for having a slightly different setup today involves technical difficulties, which is, a thing that happens. Another reason for a slightly different setup today, friends, is that we have a special guest in the second half of the show. This is going to sound like a bit, but it's not. Marianne Williamson is coming on. Presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. You've definitely heard of her. You definitely have. You have, and someone I've wanted to talk to for a while because I find her very interesting. Definitely had a super interesting journey. Alice Pronto, thanks for acknowledging the beard. I was gonna shave the beard, friends. And then I realized I should just go for it. I should go for it till the end of the year. The end of the year, I should go for it and just keep growing the beard. So that's what I'm going to do. Hopefully you all are okay with that. We have a couple more videos to film this year, and then the beard will be trimmed for the start of 2024. But Marianne Williamson, someone who and is an author, someone who's considered like a spiritual guru for a long time, ran for president in 2020 as part of the Democratic primary. It was someone that I wasn't really super familiar with before. And I remember after the first debate being like, oh, she said all that good stuff. And she's actually running again this year. I know we have an incumbent Democratic president but she's out here and we respect it. So we're really excited to talk to her. Someone who I think has a lot of really interesting ideas, especially on the way in which we leave out kind of human and spiritual considerations from the way we do politics. And because of that, I wanted to talk to her for a while. And I shot my shot, friends, earlier this week, and just via Wisecrack's Twitter, tagged Marianne Williamson and said, please come on the stream. And then it worked out. So really excited to, be talking to her. And that's going to be in the second hour of today's show. So if you're here for the Marianne content, that'll be about 50 minutes. So let your friends know. Again, please like the stream if you're here. Last week was fun. We got to 1,000 concurrent, so we went full raw dome. I'll be honest with you. If we get to 1,000 while I'm talking to presidential candidate and author Marianne Williamson, I'm not going to announce raw dome. I will subtly acknowledge it, and I will make the appropriate moves. So I just want you to know that, I don't change my values and become someone different just because we have a big time guest. But excited to talk to her. The things I plan to ask her about are things I think we're all interested in, stuff we talk about a lot. I actually read her book, Politics of Love, yesterday to prep for it, which again, one of these books that I was like, I'm not gonna like this, but it's pretty great. As always, here with producer Henry, of course. And we actually have producer Olivia in the studio today helping out. So we're really stacked team-wise. Dennis Vandermeer asked, what about 666? That is one that's tough. I do hope if we get to 666, it happens before we're joined by Marianne Williamson, because I do not want to. Oh, can I lower the seat a little bit? Maybe I should do that. Because I do not want to yell 666, especially with a spiritual writer who's noted for positivity and good vibes and stuff like that. I don't want to do that. But we're excited to have her on later. So, stick around for that. Like the stream if you haven't. Lots of stuff to talk about today, as always. And I'm going to try to be relatively focused. There were some critiques of the last stream that I get a little unfocused. There were some critiques that I spend too much time talking to chat, you all. So, I'm going to try to balance that, but it sucks because I like talking to you all so much because you're all so great. It is what it is. So let's start with some comments. Now, Henry, remind me, was the first, which one shows up for you first? Oh yeah, great. So this is we did a video on cults. If you haven't watched it, please check it out. What inspired that video was the recent Netflix and Amazon documentary series on the Twin Flame Universe organization. I think even if you haven't seen either of those doc series, you can still get something out of the video. The interesting thing in the video, as far as I see it, was the way in which we tracked how the logic of a certain type of cult is similar to the logical structure of elements of the internet, and that the internet is set up really well for those sorts of things. But EPLE3 said, I love how Michael keeps comparing improv to cults. It's true. You all might have seen the famous BoJack Horseman episode where Todd goes on an improv cruise and learns that it's a cult. But basically, the improv comedy and improv theater world is very culty. I think that it's culty in structure. It's not culty in the sense that there's not often high-level criminal abuse, but the way in which it's a system that sort of like gets you to pay money to stay involved, to work up these levels, to do this important thing, to be like the gurus. And then the thing it especially does is the improv theater like makes you think that everyone who's a part of it is really important, even if they're just important within that space. So I do think that's true. If anyone else has spent way too much money for on improv classes and stuff, let me know in the comments. This is a comment from, is the next one for you, Henry, the one that starts, I gotta say? This is from user a well-mannered white family 973. A well-mannered white family, 973. I got to say, I know it's probably not as lucrative in the metrics, but the steady slide into more general philosophy applied to current event topics over the previous philosophy applied to movie and TV topics have been really enlightening. Being able to apply the idea of some of the world's greatest thinkers to the horrors of the present day makes the bleakness slightly more bearable. Thank you, well-mannered white family. Yeah, as you all know, that's kind of been a bit of a large-scale shift on the channel in recent years. Maybe recent year is a better way to put it. I'm into it. I enjoy it. It's a lot of what we do here on the stream. However, as some of you know, the exclusive announcement in 2024, we are going to be launching a second feed where we do video essays and a podcast on movies and TV. If any of you were fans of a little thing called Show Me the Meaning, I'm just saying. This next comment from Dominique Louis something says, thank you so much for this video. Took me right back to the best parts of grad school. Like, I love the ways you connected the social implications of our definitions of humanity, especially in the present moment. Yeah, so we did a video on humans and animals and what it means when we call humans animals, how dehumanization works, how some of the stuff is tied into processes like colonization. So I appreciate that. I would hope that at best what we do here is like the good parts of grad school and not the bad parts, because there's a lot of bad parts of grad school. We can talk about that another time. Last comment here from Dan Tasty. Dan Tasty. I guess when they called their name in school, they would say Tasty. Dan. Only tuned in live for a small segment, but was humbly blessed by the dome during my morning routine. What a time to be alive. Wow. There you go. Let's do it. Cool. So thank you for your comments as always. We like them. We read them. We look at them. What's up in the chat? Ross Peterson says we're going to get Raw Dome 2 weeks in a row. I'm going to say probably not. I don't say that to be negative. I just don't see it happening again today. So there you go. That's my prediction. I'm curious what your predictions are. You can let us know in the chat. So today, obviously, in the second half of the show, we're going to be talking to Marianne Williamson. Before then, some things I thought we should talk about related to things I think we talk about a lot, which be the university, education in this country, things of that nature. Now, as you know, and it's a weird day to say this because, you know, we have a political figure coming on, but we don't do too much explicit political activity here. You know that our politics are empathy and everyone should have a good life. But the politics of the current situation in the past week have bled even more into the discourse around the modern university. Now, to be clear, this is not new. We've talked about it on the channel a bunch. The modern university, in many ways, has been under attack. Now, I'm not someone who thinks that universities are the best thing ever. Chris Maverick wants to know how the algorithm pumped so many live viewers in last week. I think it was because we talked about H-Bomber Guy in that video and that like people shared it in servers or things like that. But, you know, I would never want to say that the modern university is just an objectively good thing. I think the idea of the university is a great thing. I think the concept of the university is a really great thing. And we've talked a lot about, you know, stuff in Florida, for example. We talked about how someone like Ron DeSantis and the public education board he put into place done things like removed African-American studies, gender studies, queer studies, critical theory, anything that, you know, connects to critical race theory from university curriculums. We've talked about New College in Florida, a public university that was oriented around the humanities and the liberal arts. They put notable bag of shit Christopher Rufo in charge over there, or at least on the board. And they're sort of slowly dismantling that place. Jasper, it's your second time, and we're glad you're here. Let's see. And of course, there's been debates about free speech on campuses. Now, often the debates about free speech on campus these days tend to be when, and I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but they tend to be debates about not letting Nazis speak on campus. It normally tends to be that. It normally tends to be that like some conservative student group at UC Berkeley, and there's like 7 of them there, and they all wear polos. And there's no disrespect. I've owned some polo clothing in my day. It's a fun brand. But those 7 students invite some alt-right Nazi speaker to speak on campus and use a campus building to say Nazi stuff. And then like thousands of other students are like, oh, we don't want to listen to the Nazi. And then this is often spinned in a certain element of the media as like, oh, these people hate free speech, which is interesting, right? Because normally folks, and a lot of folks that lean kind of far right, alt right, whatever, are mad because, and I'm being slightly hyperbolic, but I don't think I'm being too hyperbolic here. They get mad when Nazis can't speak on college campuses. Now, some of these same people are really concerned about anti-Semitism on campus. Now, let's bracket here and say some things. Anti-Semitism is a real thing. It is a bad thing. It is a thing that has ramped up recently, which is horrible and sucks. Examples of anti-Semitism being very real, I don't know, like the time Nazis marched in Charlottesville and killed someone. Not being political here, it is a thing that happened. So just to be clear, in getting into this topic, I would hope that we all can acknowledge, agree, etc., on like 2 things. And I'm gonna say this, and then Henry can correct me on this. But I think we can agree: 1, Nazis, bad.
Yes.
2, anti-Semitism, thing that exists, also bad.
Yes.
Is that okay that I said that, Henry?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are some principles we are proceeding with in this conversation. Okay. MF something says you're conflating alt-right with conservatives. And that's MF something or motherfucking something. That wasn't a diss. I just thought that maybe that's what you meant there. I 100% agree that there is a difference between, what it means to be conservative in a classical sense and what it means to be alt-right. I do think there's a lot of overlap and conflation, and I do think a lot of more classical conservatives in American government have recently at least like flirted with or lightly filleted the alt-right, maybe just to get votes or whatever. Drift King agrees. Both very bad. So there you go. Let's see. Yeah, Semper Invicta said no trouble with free speech, but those were hateful speeches, in my opinion. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because like hate speech and free speech, maybe those are different. But I don't know. Maybe that's not the whole talk today. But let's just acknowledge that stuff, and hopefully we can all agree. If you don't agree with those principles, what's up, Austin Massey? If you don't agree with those principles, we can talk about it. We talk about it in a chill way. But recently there have been, if there's any college students who are in the chat today, would love to hear what you all think. Now, historically, we know that colleges are always a hotbed of protest activity because you have a lot of young people who are very engaged in the world, who know what's going on around them, who are passionate, and who have a lot of free time. And there have been a lot of on-campus protests in recent months that have been in opposition to America's support of Israel's military operations in Gaza. And again, guys, if I get any of this wrong, let me know. But I'm trying to frame this all very carefully, right? So that is the thing that has been happening. So sorry, just looking at the chat. Just love looking at you guys, just knowing that you're here. Eddie, I got a thing from Eddie in the mail. I need to open. I'm so excited about it. Thank you so much, Eddie. So protests have been happening. I will just say this: for most of the things that I have seen, whether things I've seen videos of on the internet, things I've read about, college students I have talked to. In general, it seems, and college students, please correct me, it seems like most of these protests have been expressing anger towards, I would say, two groups. One, the American government and the Biden administration. It seems like a lot of college students are very frustrated with the Biden administration's support of military attacks by Israel on Gaza that have led to, and I forget the exact number, but I think we're almost at like 20,000 civilians, like half of them children. And I think it's now like 20,000 orphaned children in Gaza because their parents have been killed. But so I think that's like one category. People are very mad at that thing. I think the other thing people have been protesting against is the Israeli military and government. Students are actively protesting the actions of that military and of that government. And we're being clear here, a military and a government. JT in the chat says, I would argue that hate speech is not as dangerous as censorship. I mean, it's such like it's a difficult one to get into because in one sense, to take JT seriously here, it would be bad if we had large scale censorship. And of course, and this is actually what we're getting at right now, JT. So I'm glad you asked that. The problem with censorship is like who decides what gets censored. And the problem, and I will acknowledge this with hate speech, is who gets to decide what hate speech is. So back to what we're talking about. So on college campuses, a lot of protests, mostly oriented at either and NF something says this, but there was a report that came out. What was the source of it? That actually showed that was false. I think it was in the Lancet, a journal of health, that does show that the numbers were relatively accurate. But so we have college students who are protesting both the American military and the American military support of the Israeli government and the Israeli government as such. And what has happened is some folks have decided that the language being used by these college students is hate speech. That whether it be students that use a slogan like "from the river to the sea," there have been some suggestions that language like "free Palestine" and "free Gaza" qualify as hate speech. And in particular, the general sense of at least one side's perspective on what's happening on college campuses is that there is an inherent anti-Semitism in the critiques of both the American government and the American military support of Israel military action and of course Israel itself. So Henry, at this point, I feel like I'm one of those topics where I feel like I'm slightly walking on eggshells here. How's it going so far?
I've been running technical. I had something crash on me on my end, in all honesty.
Oh no, so sorry. Don't even worry.
But I just gave you some more info in chat on the side. I think you've been pretty cogent so far for what I've been listening to.
Okay.
I find it hard to talk without trampling on eggshells on the topic myself, so I find what you're doing very graceful.
There we go, guys. Again, I don't know politics. I don't know what politics are. I live in a bubble. I come out once a week to do this. I go back in the bubble. They hook me up to tubes. The tubes are full of KFC lunch buckets that get blended, and then the KFC little bucket bowl gets pushed right into my veins. So that's what the situation is there. Now, all of this led to some government hearings about protests and anti-Semitism on campus. And one of the people who was behind this was representative from New York, Elise Stefanik, someone who, and this is me just trying to describe things in relatively objective terms, is MAGA affiliated or whatever that means. Now, let's see. And I think some things to note about Stefanik as well. She is a Harvard grad who for years now has publicly been very anti-Harvard and very out to get him. This is, just Google it. It's out there. So someone who seems like she has a chip on her shoulder. Now, there were some hearings. In the hearings, and again, friends, correct me in the chat if I'm missing any of this. Dare Johnson also has the tubes full of gravy. So, yeah, Mr. Navidad's right. He gets the chicken from the bucket or he gets the host. That's absolutely true. Again, thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see. And hey, someone, and I'm sorry, I don't read Hebrew, so I don't use your name. Hey, Israeli Jew here. I must say the critique on Israel is something I can completely understand. It's the call for intifada. It's kind of thing that makes me scared. Hey, fair. Thank you for jumping in. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Disky said, so far, Burns. Let's see if I get in trouble by the end of this. So in these hearings,
yeah, keep going.
There are some hypothetical questions asked. Now the thing that went the most viral and the thing that people talked about most was a response to a question, which was, does it constitute bullying or harassment, or what would you say for students that called for the genocide of Jews? Now I'm going to get a little spicy here. I do not think that was a good faith question by Representative Elise Stefanik. I think if you look into the history of this person's politics and work, this is not someone who's been overtly concerned with anti-Semitism. This is someone who has actively supported politicians who, when literal Nazis, did a march in Charlottesville and someone died, said there's good people on both sides, right? This is someone who's been adjacent to that world. This is someone who, as far as I know, did not make any big public statement after Charlottesville or other horrific acts of anti-Semitism that happened in this country. But this is the one where she jumped off the bench. My reading on this, and I'll just putting my cards on the table, is that it was a bad faith question. By saying bad faith here, we're just saying that someone is asking a question that they're not asking earnestly. They're asking so they can elicit a response that plays into what they think or they want to do. It's sort of the creation, in a sense, it's like the creation of a viral moment. Now, the reason I don't think it's an important question is by asking this question, it created a media narrative by which then people said, oh my God, on college campuses, they are calling for the genocide of Jews. Again, let me know if I'm wrong. I have not seen that. I have not seen that as a thing that was actually said. And, someone in the chat says it wasn't a bad faith question. The answer is very simple. Here's the problem. Representative Elise Stefanik knows what academics are like. Now, I know some of you in the chat are academics. I'm a former academic. I've worked at universities. I know we got people like Chris and Eddie in the chat who are academics and work at universities. Academics, if you've ever hung out with them, guys, and let's say this, there's a reason why I can sit here and talk for 2 hours a week, right? Because academics talk. Academics parse language. Academics don't give yes or no answers to hypothetical questions. So and again, I'm not saying that all the answers given by the university presidents to that hearing were like good. I don't think many of them were. However, I will say that as an academic, I totally understand why when you come at someone with a question, Chris Maverick says absolutely not a simple question. But when you come at an academic with a question like that, they're not just going to say yes or no. They're going to say things like, well, depending on the context and when it was said, and if it was said this way, and actually harassment means this, and this means that, blah, 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 blah. And I think that like the reason that people got mad is because they're not used to how academics talk. They're not used to how academics think through things. And I think the genius of the person that asked those questions, and Chris Maverick calls these poorly worded, especially not poorly worded, obvious trick questions. The person asking the questions knew that this was going to happen. Let's see. So Ellie B says, I live in New York City. I'm a Jewish woman. And thank you for sharing this, Ellie. I've been watching the protests around town. I haven't seen active chance of violence. I've seen a few people with a bad sign or flag, but not the group. That's been my experience as well. That, like, in general, and I will say, at least in Los Angeles, most of the large scale protests that I know of and the groups doing these things are largely led by Jewish people. And I think that any sort of whiffs of very unfortunate, very sad, and very effed up anti-Semitism have been the minority and have been pushed out. Someone said, I've been in academia. People can answer simple yes or no questions. But either way, this became like the news story of the week. This became what all the media was talking about. And here's me putting my cards on the table. And then I want to look at an article by Sarah Jones in New York Magazine's Intelligencer. Sarah Jones is a really great writer. Here's my take on it, friends. No one cares what I think, but here's what is happening. This is being used by people largely with one ideological framework in this country to make the argument for the further defunding of universities, for the further loss of power by academics and things like that, and more business leaders and non-academics to be put into power. It is perpetuating this false narrative that universities, someone said MW no show. Guys, Marianne Williamson's going to be coming on in the second hour, so stick around. She'll be here in about 25 minutes. But things like this, and this is why I bring up bad faith, is being used to make the argument that we should basically dismantle the university because the university is turning all the kids into like radical Antifa, trans commie super soldiers who hate freedom and hate America. That's the thing that's happening. Outright Tiny, you beat the ADHD and we love it. So guys, that's what I think is happening here. That's what I think the end game is. A lot of the people that seem really mad about this now, I have not seen be that concerned with anti-Semitism before. I've not seen be that concerned with Nazis on campus. Haven't been that concerned with Nazis and alt-right leaders and Proud Boys and things like that. Haven't been concerned about those folks. But now they're really concerned. And that's sort of my worry as someone who is watching what's been happening to universities. And, even when I was still teaching and was still at university, I was already seeing how a sort of business mindset was taking over, an administrative mindset was taking over. Now that's being met with a sort of reactionary, fearful mindset. And that is what is scary. Because again, and this is what confuses me as well. The big call, and this is what like Bari Weiss, who's my estranged sister, half sister, because one of my 14 dads, it's a whole thing. But my estranged half sister, Bari Weiss, made the point and basically connected anti-Semitism to DEI programs, which is what? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Someone said, yeah, it's like them caring about women's sports. But basically, Bari Weiss, again, half sister, one of my 14 dads, it's canon, is making the argument that anti-Semitism connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion. These same people are making the argument that anti-Semitism is being caused by people being educated about critical theory and history and politics. Now, in my mind, DEI programs would be helpful in teaching us about, I don't know if that's how I pronounce Bari, half sister, like I said. I don't think the stream lore is up to date. But for my money, learning about diversity, learning about historical oppression, learning about systemic oppression, learning about anti-religious violence, learning about race-based violence would actually help us understand anti-Semitism, would help us understand how things like anti-Semitism and racism and homophobia and colonialism function in society. And if you are going to say that there is a if you're going to say that there's a situation on college campuses where there is unchecked anti-Semitism, and then you're going to use that as a justification for defunding diversity programs, for taking out education in the humanity, critical theories, gender studies, queer studies. What are you doing? What is happening? It's insane. And I all week have been watching this and listening to this, and I'm just like, do we not see the very obvious thing that's happening right here? The very obvious thing that's happening right before our eyes, where people, and then the second question, of course, is why do some people want to defund, destabilize universities? Why do people want less students to study critical theory, the humanities in general, gender studies? Why do some states want to take African American history out of their curriculum? Well, why do some schools want to make it to where kids can't learn about the realities of slavery in America? What is the end game of all this? And this is the worst part about it. Again, if you're just tuning in, we're getting into it. The worst part about all this is that anti-Semitism is a real thing. That in America, at least, we have actual Nazis, and all of this is taking the focus away from the actual Nazis and focusing on college students, largely protesting against a war. I don't know when you guys went to college. I went to college during the second Iraq War, and there was protest against both, the American government and Britain and other nations that were supporting what was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. College students protesting against war isn't original. You guys ever heard about the 60s? You ever heard of it? You heard a thing called the 60s? Google Kent State, when students were peacefully protesting the Vietnam War at Kent State University in Ohio, and they got killed by the National Guard, or any number of protests that took place in college campuses during the Vietnam War. It's not a new thing. So there you go. Let's see. The chat seems fun. We're all having fun in here. Let's look at this article. This is from Sarah Jones. It's called "Don't Lose Sight of Gaza." And again, guys, if you're just tuning in, we're talking about the recent hearings about anti-Semitism on campuses, in some cases, bad faith line of questioning that's been behind some of this, things of that nature. And we're talking about it because we're interested. We care about education. So this is from New York Magazine. It starts, as Israeli forces bomb civilians in Gaza, American activists and politicians are turning towards other more tempting subjects. Maybe you've heard by now, elite schools are in chaos. And it's worth noting as well that the schools that have been targeted are all, for the most part, Ivy League schools. Students fight, administrators dither, while donors complain, and the powerful are paying attention. The House recently convened a hearing on campus anti-Semitism, and tales of the Ivy League topped the New York Times homepage on Monday. Cancel culture is not a new fixation for the Times, but the stakes have arguably risen with the onset of war. Since the Hamas attack on October 7th, that Israel said killed around 1,200 people and took another 240 hostages, Israel has killed over 17,700 people in Gaza alone, most of them civilians, according to Gaza's health ministry. Thousands of children are among the dead, and millions have been displaced from their homes. The Israeli strategy is one of collective punishment, which will neither defeat Hamas nor free all the hostages. The situation in Gaza demands moral urgency from the world. Though there are glimpses of courage in America, the sight tends to be fleeting. Gaza is bleeding while a coalition of American activists, some members of Congress, and now the press are focused on campus speech. So now this is getting into the hearings that happen. I'm sure a lot of you already know some of these details, but we'll read a little bit more there. Maeve says, the new What Makes This Song Stink makes some great at points, comparing Ohio versus Try That in a Small Town as protector songs, and it's great. Ooh, I want to check out that song. I haven't seen it. And then where was this? Dead Card says, I remember how anti-patriotic it was for me to not want my classmates to go off for a third tour in Afghanistan. Yeah, I mean, that was, and I'll just say this too, as someone who's older than some of you, thanks for being everyone. Thanks for being in Wisecrack Live. We're going to be joined about 15 minutes by presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. We're really excited about that. I'm old enough to remember when it was very bad if you did not support the second war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Like really bad, guys. I'm talking like you were anti-American. It was bad. It was a real big deal. All this sort of stuff. But now it's not bad. Now, even politicians who supported those wars are like, oh yeah, are bad. So I'm just saying, sometimes, guys, sometimes. Royale, thank you. I do have a dad beard now. I'm going to keep it through the end of the year. Okay, so this says the spectacle has already pushed one college leader out of a job. On Saturday, Elizabeth Magel resigned, Magel, as president of the University of Pennsylvania. She'd first come under fire in September when a Palestinian literary festival was held on campus. The critics accused speakers, including academic Mark Lamont Hill and Roger Waters, once of Pink Floyd, of anti-Semitism. In Hill's case, the evidence is thin. In 2008, he lost a role at CNN after calling for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Major university donors would withdraw contributions after October 7th, accusing Magel of an inadequate response to anti-Semitism on campus. Magel's resignation comes days after she appeared at a congressional hearing on the subject. In a viral clip, Representative Elise Stefanik of New York accused students who chant Antifada of calling for the genocide of Jewish people. And I'll say this too, in doing like cursory reading and research, I have not seen a direct connection between a call for Intifada and genocide. I don't know if Henry knows more about this. I would love for Henry to speak up and get canceled. But in the meantime, I'll just say that I'm going to have to take a couple bites of this in the next 13 minutes so I have adequate energy and focus to talk to our guest.
Yeah, I haven't understood this argument, but again, I'm not very learned on the subject as well.
Guys, Henry knows everything about this. He's just trying to not get canceled. Typical cowardice. I'm putting my life on. I'm kidding. Sorry, this is me chewing. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah. And she asked, and this is Stefanik says, calling for the genocide of Jews, does that constitute bullying or harassment? Magel said, if it is directed and severe, pervasive, it is harassment. It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman. Now, again, I don't know if that's what I would say if I was a university president, but that does sound like university presidents speak. Stefanik pounced. That's your testimony today? Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. Now, to me, that line shows like the bad faith instance, because what the university president is clearly talking about here, and again, I'm not saying this person's inherently good or smart or anything, but it's clear to see that this is someone who's like has university administrator brain on, and they're like, well, we have to deal with a lot of things on campus. What counts as harassment? Blah, 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 blah. And Stefanik clearly asked this question, knowing that she could then create a viral clip of saying, oh, so you think the genocide of Jews is dependent on context? Saturday, after Magel announced her resignation, Stefanik rejoiced, 1 down, 2 to go. So like, it's very clear when you use that language, you clearly are targeting these people. So there you go. And here's the thing too. I see, extraneous brought up looking up definitions. Yeah, someone just said intifada equals resistance. The problem, King of the Internet says intifada is a rebellion or uprising or resistance movement. The problem these days, guys, is people get to decide what words mean, and then they get mad at what they decide that the word means.
Yeah,
that's good. That's healthy.
Definition wobble, the best. Just on a conceptual level, it's just that intifada is like liberatory. It's freeing yourself from something, not exterminating a thing.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get back to it. So again, like that's, and again, for anyone just tuning in, we're talking about what's been going on at universities, talking about the congressional hearings. We're saying all of this against the backdrop of 2 fundamental principles: anti-Semitism, real and bad; Nazis, real and bad. Stefanik isn't the only person who wants gay and corn both to lose their jobs. Her cause is championed by Bill Ackman, the billionaire hedge fund manager. Google Bill Ackman plus Epstein. I'm just saying. The billionaire hedge fund manager and Democratic donor, and by conservative activists such as Christopher Rufo. Rufo, bad guy. On X, Ackman posted a piece co-authored by Rufo, who's bad, which accuses Gay of plagiarizing her doctoral dissertation. The conservative Washington Post Free Beacon said it uncovered additional examples. The Harvard Corporation called the examples a few instances of inadequate citation and said they did not amount to misconduct, and that she agreed to correct and update the works in question, according to the Harvard Crimson. On Tuesday, the board announced that she would remain in office, dealing a blow to Stefanik, Ackman, and Rufo. The board of MIT has also said it stands by Kornbluth. Good for them. Good for them. Hey, again, Wisecrack Live. Michael Burns hanging out with producer Henry. Oh, what'd you say? Oh, awesome. Producer Olivia hanging out in the studio today as well. We're really having a party here. We're really having a party. Someone said, your point on indirectly promoting distrust of universities made a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, again, that's what I think is happening here. That's what I think is happening. Again, this is just a way to attack universities. And all I would say is, I'm not going to give you an answer here because I don't know it. Why? Right? We always got to think down the road of like, why? Why would people want to undermine universities? Why would people want, especially academics and faculty and presidents at, prestigious liberal universities, why would they want them to suffer? Why would Christopher Rufo, as mentioned in the story, work with Ron DeSantis to turn a liberal arts college that was sort of a haven for, weirdos and freaks and queer students and lefties and all types of weirdos? I mean this in the best way possible. Why do they want to turn that place into like a little conservative center? I don't know. Back to the article, though Kornbluth and Gay appear safe for now, the underlying preoccupation with campus speech probably isn't going away. Let me just do one thing. Okay. Pro-Israel groups like Canary Mission have smeared critics of Israel for years, and the effort is bearing fruit for them now. In a video on Substack, the writer and editor at large of Jewish Currents, Peter Beinart, argued that the more difficult it becomes to defend Israel's actions on the ground, the harder one needs to work to, again, create a new conversation on what's happening among Israel's critics. There's no grand conspiracy, he says, and there is also real anti-Semitism in the U.S. But the description of the kind of anti-Semitism that is supposedly happening on college campuses, right, is completely divorced from actual reality. Later adding that the struggle, it seems for me, to end Israeli impunity is also a struggle for academic freedom and free speech in the United States. So, hey, back to the free speech thing. Campus speech isn't an entirely inconsequential subject. Stripped down to its most basic element, the debate over free speech is a fight over power. Who gets to speak is shorthand for who matters. Again, we're reading an article by Sarah Jones in New York Magazine, The Intelligencer, on this issue. We don't have thoughts or feelings. We're just reading what Sarah says. Campus speech isn't an entirely inconsequential subject. Stripped down to its most basic element, the debate over free speech is a fight over power. If opponents of the anti-Zionist left can be silenced, they can defeat it. That dynamic is heightened on the elite campus because, in theory, to win that territory is to remake the ruling class. I'll read that again. That dynamic is heightened on the elite campus because, in theory, to win that territory is to remake the ruling class. How else to explain Stefanik's gloating? The Republican representative from New York is no warrior against anti-Semitism. Her political opponents are Soros-backed, she sometimes says, which invokes images of a shadowy Jewish cabal. And this is a thing people say. They say like Soros-backed. It's a way to say like that, like there's a cabal of rich Jewish people who are controlling things. Sort of an anti-Semitic dog whistle. Though the fight for free speech matters, actors like Stefanik and Rufo transform it into a farce. It's Gaza, not Stefanik or even Magel, that should command America's attention. As the Times publishes story after story on Harvard and Yale, Israel destroys Gaza's schools and kills its academics. The bloodshed won't slow without international pressure on Israel. Don't lose sight of Gaza or the innocent dead. They can't afford a distraction. So again, there's an article called Don't Lose Sight of Gaza by Sarah Jones in New York Magazine, looking at what's going on. Oh, so James Sizemore says, highly recommend everyone watch Ryan Grimm's interview with Ted Cruz on Counterpoints. It lays out pretty clearly the definition wobble. Yeah, I mean, the definition wobble is a real thing, right? It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing when language can be as fluid as that, right? Like, I don't know. Henry, do you have any thoughts that will allow me to take a bite of a granola bar?
Yeah, it gets to the question of how do you engage, or what do you do when there's nothing but bad faith engagement? It's kind of why I'm interested in hearing what Marianne has to say, because I mean, so many things hinge on, on a conceptual level, just like faith is no better way to put it, that you're working in good faith with people who all want the same agreed upon kind of social goal or social structure and how to attain that. And I just think we're in an era full of a lot of bad faith in that sense, a lot of just like gotcha and one-upsmanship. It's kind of like this weird the kind of shorthand slang I think of is like crab bucket mentality to describe like people of underclass position kind of tearing at each other and keeping themselves from getting out of the crab bucket. But it's kind of interesting to me how America's starting to reproduce that mentality on a level higher than the underclass. Like, it's something I've been thinking about, especially after watching Lady Ballers, is even like the rich people are trashy. And that is completely my own commentary there. I'm not saying that for the sake of the channel or anything like that. But you see, I don't know, it's weird seeing the machine kind of copy pasting what was a sort of lower class kind of pit them against each other brain. But like now all we can do is pit each other against each other, it feels.
Yeah. And I think it's a sense in which it feels like the onus is always on like distracting from the aims of things, distracting from what is happening down the road and focusing on, the virality of an immediate conversation, discussion, or comment that we feel like is crazy, and not really thinking about where it's all aiming at. Let's be Aristotelian, guys. Let's think about teleology. Let's ask a question about like, where do things aim? What is the goal or the ideal outcome, of a course of action? And he would say the same thing like for Henry and his favorite movie, Lady Ballers. Like, what is the aim of something like that? Let's see. TA said, you're making this into something that's not. It's not about discrediting universities randomly. It's about protecting Jewish students. I hope you know that I don't think either of us would say that we don't think it's incredibly important to protect Jewish students right now. Anti-Semitism on campus is horrible. But also, I think if we're going to think about that, then we do have to think about the fact that like 3 Arab students were shot in Vermont. One of them is never going to walk again. So not to be a bummer, but it is what it is. And also, yeah, Chris said those Jewish students leading the protest. Again, like I think it's a really dangerous category error that conflates Jewish students with the nation state of Israel to act as if it's not Jewish students themselves. Great. Okay, guys, so let's go. We're going to go to a waiting screen for 2 seconds. When we come back, we'll be here with Marianne Williamson. Share the stream. Get ready. Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome back. We're now joined by author and 2024 presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. Marianne, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's fun to be
Yeah,
here.
I mean, so something I don't know how familiar you are with what we do, but we're sort of like an education channel grounded in thinking about philosophy, critical theory. Before I was doing this, I was a university professor, but YouTube's more fun. And a thing we often talk about is when we get into politics, often on our channel, we're not super explicit, but we'll say things like, if we do have a politics, it's that we should have empathy for everyone and that everyone deserves to have a nice life. And in looking at a lot of the things that you've campaigned on and that you seem to stand for, it seems like a lot of it does boil down to that in a really nice, simplistic in a positive way manner. And something I'm wondering if you could speak on this is how you got to that place in your life where you develop those political values. They seem like they've been a part of your journey, your narrative for a long time. So how did that start for you, where you started thinking about justice and humanity and what it means to be spiritually connected to others and all these sorts of things?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that the things that you described as the principles that you have come to believe should be the bedrock of our politics are the principles of the Declaration of Independence. Hello. Which, right? All men are created equal, endowed by God with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that the government is instituted to secure those rights. That's exactly what you just said. And Abraham Lincoln said that the Declaration of Independence is the eternal rebuke against all forces of tyranny and oppression. So I look at the Declaration of Independence, which again are the principles you just articulated, as our North Star. In the Jewish religion, it says that every generation must rediscover God for itself. That's a really profound concept, that every generation has to rediscover for itself the principles on which we purport to stand. So any of us, regardless where we come from in our personal lives, and this is why it's so important to teach our children what these basic first principles are, it's our task, I think, to reflect on what those principles mean at any particular time. In fact, the forces that would mitigate against empathy, the forces which would mitigate against the idea that everyone should be given the right to thrive, are as active today as they have ever been in our history. And when you look at the whole trajectory of American history, you see that these forces today are simply another iteration of the same stuff that's been with us from the beginning. Now, if you look at the arc of social justice movements in the United States, it's not an accident that they were based within religious circles. So among white abolitionists, much of this came from the early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. The women's suffragist leaders were religious Quakers, and of course, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. So anyone who comes from a place of genuine spiritual devotion recognizes that core to spirituality, not only the path of the heart, but the idea that that path of the heart is not only what should guide our lives, but that path also unites us. And when you have that as your grounding principle, then it simply flows from there, that you want public policy as well as your own personal behavior to the best of your ability to be an open-hearted response to the suffering of humanity.
Yeah.
And once again, this is not just your idea or my idea. This is what the Declaration of Independence says.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point you make as well about the connection of spirituality and religion to so many liberatory and progressive movements. I mean, like John Brown was motivated by his faith.
Absolutely.
So many elements of in Latin America, like liberation theology, the way they were reading scriptures, that this means
Absolutely.
like liberation for the poor. And it's a weird moment we're in now where, we kind of see the opposite happening, where a lot of public discourse on the relationship between spirituality and religion and politics tends towards a really conservative angle. And I think in some ways is maybe that even alienates people who are kind of maybe feeling caught between their faith and where they see their religious leaders leaning politically.
Well, on one hand, you're right. You've got people claiming to be basing their principles on the Bible that completely are leaving out love one another, do not
Mhm.
judge, feed the hungry and help the poor.
Yeah, the,
Not
the
to
real
mention
important
be good
stuff.
to the stranger. Yeah, you've got that. But then you've got on the other side the fact that there is uh, this left secular kind of neo-Marxist perspective, which displays so much contempt for faith, that
Mhm.
even those who are coming at faith from a progressive place are made to feel looked down on. I mean, I certainly see this in my own life. Oh, that's woo-woo. Um, so the left is not always a friendly place for those of us who embrace progressive politics from a spiritual basis.
Yeah. There's something you say about this in your book, Politics of Love, which I really found interesting, especially as someone who I really like a lot of the music and culture from the 60s. And I often think about, I'm in my late 30s, and sometimes I'll look at the generation that was politically and culturally active then with a bit of longing, like, why can't we have this? And if I can read a line from your book, you say, over the years, I've gone from having to justify my spiritual interest to a politically oriented father, to feeling the need to justify my political interest to a spiritually oriented audience. After the 60s, those two domains, politics and spirituality, had taken differing directions, and I felt caught between the two. And just giving a couple lines, you say spirituality is simply the path of the heart, and if it applies to anything, then it applies to everything. And I was so caught by that, because it does feel like there was a point in, let's say, the 60s, early 70s, where there was a spiritual and a political component to a lot of movements that work together. And it feels like in my lifetime, what I've seen is kind of what you've described. On one side, let's say a progressive politics that can get a little bit cold and unhuman or unspiritual. And on the other side, a spirituality that feels divorced from politics, or a spirituality that's maybe more individual focused than it is focused on a collective. So I don't know, in your lifetime and sort of your journey, do you have any thoughts on how that disconnect happened and how we got to where we are now?
Yeah, definitely I do, because I was there. So we
Yeah.
used to read Ram Dass and Alan Watts in the
Yeah.
morning and go to anti-Vietnam War protests in the afternoon. Nobody, it was a large countercultural sensibility that included everything. It included music, it included sex, it included
Mhm.
spirituality, included politics. There wasn't a sense of different lanes that were only allies. It was the idea that we were all in part of the same countercultural burst of new possibility. I don't think that there's any way to overstate the devastating effect of those assassinations. And then
Mhm.
also, not only the assassinations, but just in case we hadn't gotten the message, killing the kids at Kent State.
Yeah.
So there was a loud unspoken message there that we were to go home and leave the public sphere alone. We were supposed to leave it to whoever it was that wanted it so bad that they were willing to kill in order to control it. And I think, we didn't have terms then like post-traumatic stress. We
Mhm.
didn't have a way to contextualize the trauma that these bullets put all of us through. They psychically shot all of us. And I think that we just kind of backed off.
Mhm.
And when we did, we split into two camps. So I often, I say jokingly, but it's not totally a joke, that those who stayed with the symptoms and the traditional political change took the East Coast. And those who said, no, we have to go, root cause and look at what's happening in our hearts, and took the West Coast. And we sort of gazed derisively at one another,
Mhm.
thinking that those on the other side didn't get it. So I think what's happening now is that both sides realize it's not enough to just be one. This has got to be a both and. As Martin Luther King said, we need quantitative changes in our circumstances and qualitative shifts in our souls. Now, the spirituality that I grew up with and that I was grounded in my generation was very much rooted in the knowledge that this had to apply to politics, that our
Mhm.
collective behavior mattered as much as our personal behavior. And don't talk to me about love if you're going to not address the hungry child in front of you. Issues of justice and so forth. But the way a lot of the higher consciousness and spiritual community unfolded in the last few decades in this country was that it stayed within a bubble. It had a lot of effect on book publishing, had a lot of effect on healing, on medicine, had a lot of effect on therapy, had a lot of effect on different in different areas of, you know, a more holistic, integrative approach. Has had a profound cultural influence, but it has been almost adamantly apolitical.
Mm.
And it's hard to get some of those people to come out of that. And when they do come out of that, they're just like, shockingly to me, sometimes they're as likely to be on the right as on the left. I think a lot of interest in Bobby Kennedy there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've even noticed it in people of like my generation post 2020 election, because I do think, you know, in the primaries and everything that was happening leading up to COVID, you know, a lot of people I knew that obviously supported you, that went on to support, you know, Sanders. I kind of had this moment where it felt like something new was going to happen. Like it felt like we were on the verge of something. And then, you know, many of those people were obviously happy to not see Trump win, but were also kind of disappointed that it felt like going backwards rather than forwards. And a lot of people I know in the intervening years have kind of gotten more into spirituality, whether it's going to therapy or getting interested in like psychedelia and art and music and exploring inner consciousness. And there's a way in which, in some cases, you see people connecting that to their political values. And another way, it almost seems like there could be a little minor repetition of what you described that happened in the 60s and 70s, where some people were maybe like, well, we tried to do something politically, it didn't work out. Let's just like retreat into ourselves. Which seems like a danger in some ways.
It is a danger, and also it's an excuse. It's an excuse for not helping. It's a convenient excuse for not getting for not getting, you know, dirt underneath your fingernails, because it's enchanting to stay only within the purview of personal growth. It has its own because after all, it is about me, right? It is. So for me in my career, and you were talking about Los Feliz and philosophical research before, the AIDS crisis burst onto the scene very shortly after I started lecturing, and started lecturing there, as a matter of fact. So for me, my career was never disconnected from an interface with serious human suffering. So I was never tempted. I was never tempted by that. First of all, by the politics that I was brought up with. You know, my father once said to me, "What happened to you? I raised you to wage the revolution. What happened to you?" And I said, "Daddy, I think love is the revolution. And look what Martin Luther King said, Daddy." And we reconciled on that. But at first he was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Because of, from the first, it was my background and, you know, political background, and then just the suffering and the devastation and the human pain that was right in front of me. That disconnection never took place.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned your father, and something I find really interesting when reading about your life are some of these stories about him. You know, there's one that I know you've told a lot before, where you came home from school and were like, "Oh yeah, my teacher told us the Vietnam War
The
was
domino
good."
theory. I was explaining the domino theory to my parents.
And that your dad just took the family to Vietnam to disprove that, which is
when
incredible.
I was talking, my mother's face was turning white, and she knew what was coming. And my father stood up and said, "Sweetheart, when you know, get the visas, we're going to Vietnam."
That's incredible. Oh, and so learning about that, not to make it about me, but I am a new father. I have a 5-month-old at home.
What do you have?
A little girl. Her name is Faye.
I have a little 7-month-old granddaughter.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So they're in the same little cohort.
Yeah, the same little cohort.
That's amazing. But you know, a thing I think about, and I was thinking about this when reading some of the stories about, you know, your parents and how you grew up, is like the influence family can have. And, you know, I'm already starting to think like, what are the things and practices that I can do to, engender that
Well,
in
you
my
should
child?
be. You should
Yeah.
be, because so much of her little brain is developing in that first year.
Yeah.
90% of brain development is in the first 5 years, and so much of that in the first year. You talking to her, you having little books. I
Mhm.
know you and your
Yeah.
partner or your wife, whomever, or husband, whatever,
Yeah.
are very clear about that. Yeah, you're
Uh,
right to be asking that question. It's very important.
yeah. So how important was that for you? Like having a father that was, and I assume a mother as well, parents that were focused on thinking about questions of justice and politics. I think a lot of people don't have that. Like, how important
Well,
was that for you growing up?
well, my father was wage the revolution, and my mother was make sure you brush your hair while you're doing it, and both of them were
Good
a little bit
combo.
make sure you wear your white gloves. So I had it wasn't all your. My father was very, he was like, I always say he was like a cross between William Kunstler and Zorba the Greek. He's just a fascinating. Um, he was a fascinating person, actually. But I also, the older I've gotten in my development as a woman,
Mhm.
I've realized it was my mother who allowed it all to
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm.
You know, and
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah.
Well, I definitely, yeah. I encourage anyone who hasn't heard these stories to go read in Marianne's books and interviews. Very interesting. So to shift a little bit, a big thing that's important for us here at Wisecrack is education. The focus on our channel is trying to help people understand like what's going on in the world using pop culture, using media, and in hearing you speak, in reading about the policies that are important to you. Education comes up over and over again, and something that personally I find to be so heartening and so amazing. And before you came on the show today, we're actually discussing about the way in which universities feel very under attack, and there's all these attacks on any sort of like progressive education, and how in Florida they're defunding teaching students about gender and critical theory and African American history, the things that humbly I would say are some of the most important subjects. So I was wondering if you can speak on like why education for you is so important to your platform and to your policies.
Well, first of all, when you were talking before about these basic principles,
Mm-hmm.
what is government for? All public policies should support the ability of people to thrive, and education is certainly an example of that. The reason we have public education was because Jefferson and others felt that without education, we would not have the critical thought processes developed that were necessary for the people to be able to govern a great nation. So that's number one. It's necessary for the society to not for people to be educated, to people have critical thought. Unfortunately, we're not doing really well on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons we're not doing very well on that issue is you have 11 states in the United States that don't even require half a year of American civics or government or American history. If you do not teach your children about the Bill of Rights, then how are they going to know that it's horrifying for those rights to be assaulted when they're adults, especially if there's only people talking to them are talking about the Second Amendment as though they're only one of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then it goes that's the issue in terms of why it's important for us to be educated as citizens. Like you were saying, we need to know our racial history, we need to know our history, we need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. We need to know what to celebrate, and we also need to know what to make sure that we course correct in our time. Then you go to the broader issue of just humanity. You and I were just talking about it with your daughter. There are, within the first 5 years of life, 90% of the brain is developed, and a lot of that in that first year. We have children in this country who are traumatized before preschool. We have elementary school students who are on suicide watch. And in public schools throughout this country, there are routinely trauma rooms. Now, a few years ago, the real hip thing was to talk about wraparound services and trauma-informed education. But then I got to the point of asking myself, why in the richest country in the world should childhood be such a trauma for millions of American children? So much happens physically, psychologically, intellectually, emotionally in those first few years of life. We have millions of children in this country who go to schools in places where they don't even have the resources to teach a child to read. If a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, 10 at the most, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. Every time you see one of these like CNN specials or something about how somebody escaped a difficult childhood in America, I'm like, we need to ask ourselves, why is childhood something that so many people have to escape in this country? So in order for us to have the society we want in 20 years, we need to do a lot more for our 10-year-olds today. That's why, as president, I want a Department of Children and Youth. We need a massive transfer of resources into the lives of children 10 years old and younger, even 5 years old and younger, to a great extent. That's why we should have subsidized childcare, for instance, paid family leave. When children, to me, America's children are the greatest collateral damage of vulture unfettered capitalism.
Yeah.
They're not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency. They're not old enough to work, so they don't have any financial leverage. And as a society, we treat their needs with profound neglect. Now, when this country was founded, women had no public voice, certainly no political voice. Raising children was seen as women's work, right? And then when we did have more of a voice, I believe it's been one of the flaws of modern feminism that we have not included conversations about children more in the realm of feminist thought and feminist activism.
Yeah. I mean, it's a thing as well that, I guess, to speak about myself again for a quick second, but since having a kid, I was really naive about how expensive it is to just have a child. Like the amount of money you have to spend.
That's exactly right.
And put my cards on the table, friends, I think total medical bills for everything it took for us to have a relatively healthy daughter, with both me and my wife having insurance, it's like $12,000 or something.
Exactly,
we're still trying
right.
to like work with insurance, and then it's a whole issue of doing that.
Exactly.
Then I didn't know, you start looking around in Los Angeles for if we want to do childcare or daycare. Well, then you're talking like people make $30,000 a year for this. So, and the thing that's really set me off of it is so much of the rhetoric, and this happens on both sides in our government, is like, we're pro-life, we're pro-family, we care about children, you must have children. If you're a woman, you don't have a choice, you have to have the kid. And we do all of this, but then there's no like material resources. So there's this gap between we're pro-family in ideals, I guess, but not pro-family in providing the material resources for people to have healthy families.
Absolutely.
It drives me insane.
Childcare is a great crisis for couples throughout and parents throughout this country. There are people, yourself included, educated professional, sometimes two people in the partnership, educated professionals, having to live with that level of stress and anxiety and paying for childcare and paying for medical support, et cetera. You don't have this in any other advanced democracy. That's really what I think Americans need to realize. This is not democracy delivering on its promises. And as Franklin Roosevelt said, the only way to forestall a fascist takeover of this country is if democracy does deliver on its promises. We've been just taught to limit our political imaginations.
Yeah. Another just quick education thing, I want to hit this. I know I know you have some policies on this or some plans. What are your thoughts on the student debt situation? Now, it's something that our audience especially. Okay, you were so quick to get to that.
This is such a moral issue. This was so predatory. Remember, we had tuition-free college and tech school. We had University of Texas when I was growing up. You can go to UT for hardly anything. University of California, University of Florida had a system. This was a predatory effort because this malevolent form of vulture capitalism just puts out its tentacles into any sector of American society where it can scent. It's like a heat-seeking missile. There's a profit center? Where is there a profit center? A potential profit center. And then this is what's so immoral about it. Where do you have your greatest potential for a profit center? Where people are desperate for something. So you have young people, particularly people of color, by the way, told if you only close that wage gap, get your education, and then you'll close the wage gap. So we now have tens of millions of people who are shackled by these loans. Now, which is unholy economic alliance between government, these lending companies, and the banks. It's disgusting. preying on our young people. And this, whether you're talking about a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, or a 25-year-old, we should be setting our kids up to win.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what you are. You married? Or you?
I am. Yeah, married. I have a wife.
Okay, so I know that you take the view. Let's set little Faye up to win, and then you release her. Then let her fly. That's how we should be treating our youth, all of our young. We're going to give you everything you need to fly. Then go fly. And then we're going to hold you accountable, by the way. But we're going to invest in you. We're going to, I say to young people all the time, to Gen Zs and so forth, I don't want you to have to worry about healthcare. I don't want you to have to worry about the cost of college. Now, what you owe with a quid pro quo, go be everything you can possibly be. Be as productive, be as creative, be as good as a friend, as a parent, as a citizen. That should be the exchange. So these college loans, I can't even, first of all, debt is crippling, period.
Yeah.
And some people, you got boomers carrying tremendous debt. There are people just praying to get out of debt before they die. Mm-hmm. But also the idea of being in my 20s, carrying tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt. I certainly wouldn't be the woman I am today. I can't even imagine kind of what that would do to you. And also that a few people can make more money. And that's no different than the carcinogens in our food, the PFAS in our water, lack of healthcare, so that a few people and a few corporations can make more money. It's wrong, it's unjust, it's immoral, and it's not going to stop unless we, the people, step in.
Yeah. I mean, something you say too, like, and the conversations that happen a lot, even in like Hollywood these days, you have so many young creative people who move out here. But what happens is those with debt don't end up with the freedom to create, to make things, to focus on things. You then have people who already have money, come from wealth. They're able to work on art. So then we have this weird cycle too, where the only voices that get to make things that represent our culture are people that come from that situation anyways. And it's harder and harder for, working people, people of color, women, queer people to get to like even make art to put their perspective out into the culture.
An ever shrinking group of Americans who have easy access to healthcare, who have easy access to education, and as you were saying, just easy access to a career in which you really have the opportunity to spread your wings and thrive. And that's where money comes from. It suppresses the economy when we suppress our own creativity and productivity that way. And when we do have policies that set people up to thrive, this stimulates the economy because it stimulates the creativity and the productivity of the American citizen.
Yeah. Well, Marianne, if it's okay, I have one more policy question and a final fun question for you. If that's okay. The final policy thing. So a lot of your policies, and if everyone hasn't checked it out, go to Marianne's website. As a friend said to me recently, he was like, I hadn't really looked into her much. And then when I looked at her website, I was like, oh, she's just right about everything.
Thank you. And that's Marianne2024.com.
Yes.
Yeah, we're great on the issues, everybody.
But one of my questions then is, so a lot of your policies, at least strike me as sort of indirect contradiction with the spirit and the motives and the end game of modern American capitalism, right? A system that doesn't value our humanity, our individuality, our spirit, our culture, but just, the perspective of the individual to labor and create surplus capital. I wonder how you think then that contradiction would go. Like, how do you see your politics being able to work in the context of, modern American capitalism? I think that's the thing a lot of younger folks struggle to even think of, like, can we even get beyond that? So I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on that.
Adam Smith, the primary architect of free market capitalism, said that it cannot exist outside an ethical context. And that's the issue here. We could have arguments all day long about whether or not this kind of soul-sucking influence on the culture is inherent in capitalism. To me, it doesn't have to be. I'm fine with hybrid economies that you see in Europe, Scandinavia, and elsewhere. As Dr. Richard Wolff says, Professor Richard Wolff, capitalism isn't it's not a light switch you turn on or turn off. What we're dealing with here is a malevolent strain of capitalism, a malevolent strain. It's not dysfunctional, it's malfunctional. There's no ethical core there. As Adam Smith said, it cannot function outside that ethical core. If you are so adamant that stockholder value, no matter what, will supersede safety, health, well-being of any other stakeholder or the earth itself. You are allowing economic principles to outweigh humanitarian principles and to outweigh democratic principles. And you are assuring that we're going to have exactly what we do have now, which is this huge income disparity. Louis Brandeis, the late Louis Brandeis, said you can have large amounts of money concentrated in the hands of a few, or you can have democracy, but you can't have both.
Mm-hmm.
After you're on the right, your life is negatively affected by
Mm-hmm.
this economic paradigm. It has turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery because of all the money that those corporate forces can use to exert influence in Congress. That's it's the cancer underneath all the cancers, is that undue influence of money on our system. So there's only one way to override that, and that is through a revolution of consciousness, a peaceful, nonviolent revolution at the ballot box. It's not, that system is not going to disrupt itself now. But once again, you and I were talking about history before.
Mm-hmm.
Other generations have stood up and repudiated systems of injustice. We responded to slavery with abolition. We responded to the institutionalized suppression of women with the suffragist movement, the 19th Amendment. We responded to the Gilded Age with the establishment of organized labor. And of course, you see its reinvigoration now. We responded to the institutionalized suppression of Black people and segregation in the American South with the Civil Rights Movement. The way I see it, it's simply our turn. And today it's not a specific institutional reality, but it's an economic paradigm. Mm-hmm. But its ubiquitous effect is deadly. And I think that we actually have a requisite number of Americans who are getting this. We have, the American people are not stupid. The problem is not the American people. The problem is a sclerotic political system that basically works at the behest of those economic corporatists, and are trying to keep the lid down so that the people who are speaking to this are not able for our voices to be heard. That's why this is a very, very important moment, everyone. And in this election, boy, the tension that has been created by all this, it's bubbling up from the bottom of things. Things are going to break one direction or the other. They're either going to break in the direction of greater justice, including economic justice and democracy, or they're going to break in the direction of dystopia and chaos and even possibly fascism. So this is a really important moment for people to think this stuff through. And if you feel that this attitude should determine the path forward, that means we cut the cord with this aberrational chapter of trickle-down economics and have a new beginning in the United States, have an economic U-turn. And if people believe that too, I hope they'll go to Marianne2024.com.
Yeah. So before we go, and we'll in the end, I want to let you tell people what they can do to support you. So Marianne, along with being a politician, a writer, a speaker, I know that you were once a professional musician as well.
I don't know about professional. I don't know about professional.
You stood in front of some microphones and some people were
it's like, I have. It's like Bill Clinton with his saxophone.
Sure. I'm going to say, I'm going to guess like at your peak, you were a better singer than Bill Clinton was at saxophone. The guy had horrible timing.
No, I was, if that were the case, no, I was about the same, actually. Okay. Well, I discovered that I was better at the speaking between songs.
The songs got shorter, the interstitial
speaking got works and let go the rest.
Well, here's my question for you. To be people that are able to do politics and be in the world and deal with other films or pieces of art that you go back to, whether it could be a song, a singer, a filmmaker. I'm just kind of curious, what is the art that Marianne Williamson enjoys in her downtime, if she ever has it?
Bob Dylan.
Awesome.
Always. Never gets old, never stops feeding. Ella Fitzgerald, particularly live in Berlin. And I like literature. I like fiction. The older I get, the more I revisit. It's strange. Like I reread Anna Karenina. I think that a lot of the old novels, like when you read them when you were 20, you couldn't possibly. It's funny talking about Anna Karenina. The thing about Tolstoy that's so fascinating is it's so modern. Tolstoy, you read Tolstoy, it feels like it could have been written like last week. And I remember when I was rereading that book not too long ago, I was really dreading the end, I mean, we all know what happens.
Yeah.
And I kind of just was dreading it. And then when I read it, I thought, oh my God, what a brilliant, ageless description of what happens in the mind of someone who is descending into suicidal action.
Yeah. Well, that's, some people in our chat are pointing out that along with having good policies, great taste in music and literature. So,
Thank you.
so hopefully
Thank you.
everyone can listen to Ella Fitzgerald live in Berlin, can read some Tolstoy. So thank you so much for your time. So what can people
Thank
do if
you.
people are excited about what you're doing, if they want to support what you're doing right now leading into 2024, what could people do?
Well, thank you, first of all. Thank you for having me on. Um, what people can do right now is to take in at an ever deeper level how serious this is. I don't think Joe Biden will defeat Donald Trump. And Donald Trump getting into the White House again is a very dangerous prospect for our democracy. If you agree with anything I just said, please, please support my campaign. Go to marianne2024.com. Do what you can. Support us financially if you can, because once again, the obscene way that the system operates to make sure that only those with a lot of capital or access to capital can get anywhere near the pinnacles of power. This is part of the crisis of our democracy. And also volunteer. Put it on your social media. Follow me on social media. Quote tweet. Make your own videos. Do whatever you feel moved to do. Gandhi was asked who is the leader of the Indian independence movement, and he said the small still voice within. So do what you know to do. Talk to people. We don't have a lot of time left. The first primary election is in New Hampshire, January 23rd, and then there's South Carolina. I mean, it all goes. The system has it locked up, or it's trying to have it locked up, and I'm going to try to hold on, because what I find is that people, when they do hear what we have to say, there are a lot of people on both left and right who realize, yeah, the majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care, want tuition-free college and tech school. But the system makes it really hard for anyone to be heard that isn't one of them. And their idea of qualified is someone who is qualified to perpetuate and maintain the system as it is. So if you want to change and you think that I have something to do with that, or could have something to do with that, which I believe I could, then please go to marianne2024.com. Throw in a buck if you can. Get loud, get active, and help us have a breakthrough, the kinds of which do make history and have made history before.
Amazing. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for just speaking in a way that feels real and human and feels honest about what's going on in the world. It's very refreshing to have someone in your position speak like that and speak in a way that I think just feels genuine. So best of luck. And thank you so much for your time, and thanks to your team as well for setting this up. I really appreciate you all.
God bless your little baby.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, that was Marianne Williamson. Thank you so much again for her and her team for being here. I didn't get to keep up with the chat as much. I looked a little bit, and I saw Chris Maverick telling people things.
Yes, I had to throw some people in timeout as well. It was a pretty active
some of you
chat.
guys were bad. Some of you were bad. We don't want that at all. Well, that was fun. That was kind of fun. Someone said two halves of Michael Burns. Well, so I that was really, I'll say this, very easy person to talk to, Henry.
Yeah, that just kind of kicked into gear, and we just started chatting ideas there, didn't you?
Yeah, that was really fun. And guys, I hope like the point of having Marianne on wasn't to be like Wisecracks endorsing presidential candidates. We're not doing that, but it's just really interesting to talk to someone.
Yeah, we don't do politics
in that position. We don't do politics, but interesting to talk to someone who's out here trying to do stuff. Interesting for us to talk to someone who, I think a lot of what we talk about obviously has to do with the intersection of politics and culture. And I was even surprised, like reading Marianne's book, kind of for stuff that we all talk about on stream. Like she quoted Plato talking about the connectivity between philosophy and spirituality and politics. And I was like, okay. And I do think, sometimes I even felt like I kind of have thought this before. Like we hear someone speaking spirituality and we can be like, oh, it's a little like woo woo, but she was spot on connecting the way in which so many like revolutionary moments and movements have been attached to spirituality. Obviously I brought up John Brown. Chris Maverick says she was kind of great, like to the point of the discussion. Can she win? No. But does she have good things to say? Absolutely. There's value in discourse. Yeah, I saw a little bit of the chat where...
Yeah, that's what it was mostly about, is the efficacy of running.
Yeah, so I think that... I mean, I'll say this. In 2016, Bernie Sanders runs, right? And the early vibe is just like, no way. He's going to ruin Hillary's moment. He's a bad boy. We don't like him. But what happened was running gave someone like Bernie Sanders a platform to speak really earnestly and honestly about problems in American politics that connect with a lot of people. And a lot of people were like, oh my God, someone who's on the TV, he just said capitalism is bad. Oh my God, he just said all the war isn't good. He just said we shouldn't have to be in debt for medical care. This is crazy. And I do think that was there. Someone said, I felt like too many softballs were thrown our way. I mean, here's the deal, right? I'm not like Anderson Cooper or whoever. That was a horrible example. I don't have any interest in owning the political figure. I just want to like talk to people. I don't know if you guys have been on the stream before. I just don't see what the point would be for me to like grill an outsider candidate nice enough to like give us her time. If Ron DeSantis comes on, I'll ask him some stuff. But so hopefully everyone knows that. But yeah, I mean, I think
let's start tweeting at Ron. We'll get him on the show.
Yeah, but I think I agree with like what Chris Maverick said, and of course too, like everyone knows, I don't agree with everything she said. I hope no one agrees with everything anyone says. That would be weird. Except I want you all to agree with everything I said. But like obviously, I think I'm obviously more critical of capitalism as a system than Marianne was. But I think the interesting thing in that conversation is like realizing that certain people want to get to the same thing. We might want to get there in different ways. But I think that's important to recognize that there's like folks out there who want to do that. It's Shane Morrison, almost like you're trying to engage in good faith. Yeah. And this kind of relates back to what we were talking about in hour one, right? Like I have no interest in doing it. And I almost think too, to be nerdy and philosophical about it, thinking back to, Socrates and early Greek philosophy, the point of dialogue isn't to own someone, but it's almost like you let someone speak. You give someone a platform to speak, and they might talk themselves into a corner. I'll tell you my big regret from that interview, guys, is that she has a platform to start a thing called like the United States Peace Force, like a sort of not a military, but like a branch that's focused on that. And I really wanted to ask her if she could rebrand it the Positivity Force, because my favorite comedian, Connor O'Malley, has a recent video about starting a positivity force. So I really wanted like a Connor O'Malley, Marianne Williamson crossover there. But it didn't happen this time. But that was fun. And thank you for those of you that hung out there, because I know it was like a different vibe. Michael Dodge says dialogue doesn't have to be combative, it's understanding. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing too, right? If someone came on the stream and they were like, corporate capitalism rips, kids should get jobs when they're 5, MLK was soft, college costs $1 billion, healthcare should be a brisk walk, you little pansy. You know what I mean? If someone said something like that, I would of course want to push them and be like, that seems crazy. But when someone's basically just saying stuff that, to be honest, like I don't disagree with much of what you're saying. So,
right. There's also within the chat the question of like, is she running a losing campaign? And just like this kind of bad faith measurement of metrics towards like the efficacy of these things. I mean, why would a live stream like ours be the place to do that kind of confrontation if it's not like got
Well, that's
the
not what we do.
yeah, like what apparatus are do you think Wisecrack Live is serving in that respect? Because I mean, I love our viewers. We have 500 concurrents right now. It's not exactly the place to get eyes on something like that, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So Merc with a Mouse said, I guess vibes are more important than literally doing anything to actually help literally anyone. I'm not sure what Merc with a Mouse is referring to there. If it is, let's say, saying that the vibe of someone running, I don't know. Like, I do think that, as well, I won't say what my political ideology is because I don't have one, but I think ideology is really important. I think that, what Marianne
Yes.
referred to as like a shift in consciousness. Now, I think some people hear language like consciousness and they're like, oh boy, there we go. The yoga teacher's talking. But guys, read Hegel, read Marx. What are they constantly talking about? Consciousness, right? What is Marx constantly talking about? The way that history shapes consciousness and consciousness shapes history. The point there is that consciousness is how we think about ourselves and how we think about the world around us. And that shifting the way that we think about ourselves in the world has material effects in how we exist in the world. I know I can only speak in my own life. But changing the way I have thought about things have radically changed the way I think about how I want to exist in the world. A Hickey, other way around. I reached out to her team. UBIK wants more child labor. But yeah, so I do think like it's important. Cranogram said she did mention a Russian book. Suspicious. But yeah, no, I think like, and that's the thing too, that I think there's a part of me that there's at a certain point in life, if I heard someone be like, your consciousness, I'd be like, oh boy. But now I'm thinking like, well, my favorite philosopher ever, Soren Kierkegaard, guy's obsessed with spirituality. But what does he mean by spirituality? He means that in his time, everything was reduced to like logical categories. And by reducing spirituality, he basically means like reducing or taking away our humanity, that thing of us that is more than just logical propositions, but that thing that involves our spirit, our empathy, our compassion, our sense of justice, all these sorts of things. So there you go.
Yeah, when you get into this idea of vibes, like I do think there is a extreme emotional deficit in American culture that leads to things like the loneliness epidemic, the alienation feelings we have, the
Yeah.
suicidal epidemic we got going on, and just
Yeah.
yeah, we often kind of neglect the emotional side of things or write it off as like, oh, that's just vibes, and yeah, it's a mindset you have to change because when you just devalue everything to its material worth, you're kind of just also hating yourself by
Yeah, and I want to give props to Merc with a Mouth in the chat for saying to Chris Maverick, I apologize being rude and unfair. That's what it's all about, Merc with a Mouth. I mean, serious too. It's
yes.
that's what it's all about. Seriously, that's what it's all about. And Merc said, Henry, thanks for me to give me a chance to think about it. I really freaking appreciate that. So props to you. I think I'm someone who get if I was me at 25 in a chat like this, I would have been saying the wildest shit. There's and maybe I'm just soft, but a version of me at 25 would have just been like, but I think that's what it's all about. Solix Windguardian said, we out here learning together. That's what we're doing. Yeah. Also, I will say this too. For me, it was all leading up to asking her about music and culture. Great picks. Bob Dylan, Ella Fitzgerald, and Tolstoy. Let's go. That was great. But yeah, so I think that if for any reason like the consciousness stuff is putting you off, I know a lot of you do mess with things like Hegel and Marx and philosophers to talk about that. So remember that consciousness in philosophical terms is often just describing the way we think about ourselves in the world, the structure of that thinking. Spirituality is often just describing the way we relate to other human beings as a more than just logical self. So
even
there you go.
Great cyberpunk and hard sci-fi is kind of about what happens beyond the
Mm-hmm.
technical with stuff in ways that entertain like these emotional questions of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Also important that Chris Maverick says, I'm still dumb sometimes and I'm almost 50 with a PhD. That's really, really important. A. Hickey says, slight rant then. You wanted to talk to her here, but did not want to ask hard questions. What was the point then? If in the same position, I would want to know how her plan is different. Oh, so A. Hickey, I see what you're saying there. So yesterday, so this all happened very quickly. Yesterday in the afternoon, her team said she could come on. So I read one of her books yesterday and just read about her as much as I could. And, you know, I think that like, I was kind of just more interested. And for me, for example, like hearing about her family and her early life and her thoughts on like the 60s and the relationship between culture and politics. I don't know. Sometimes when someone is older than me, you know, has had a lot of experience, I do like just listening to people. Like if you ever catch me in a bar with a bunch of old folks, I'm just like down to listen. And I guess when we think about like, and this is to respond to A. Hickey's question, which is super fair. I guess I just don't know. Like, so for example, in reading about her policies, one of the things I did feel was like, oh man, a lot of this is really good. I struggle to see how much of this can be actualized in the context of American capitalism. So I asked her about that. I think I did. And, you know, it's not insane for like an American politician running to be president to be like, yeah, but we got to work within capitalism. Because again, like even, you know, Scandinavian style social democracies still have capitalist economies. They also just have big welfare states, high tax rates, and lots of protections. And I do think that, and maybe this is me, guys, I think the best case scenario in my lifetime in America would be to get like a president who was like, capitalism kind of sucks, but we can't fully get rid of it. So let's make things a little less better. Chris Maverick says, yes, it's not a CNN town hall, guys. It was just a thing. And also I'll say this too. Aaron Carson says this thing. I watched some of like the recent interviews with her. I just wanted to ask her different stuff. You know, I wanted to like ask stuff that I was interested in. So that's that. But yeah, but all fair questions from you guys. I do like doing interviews though, so it'd be fun. Yeah, Logan Reed says, I'll settle for an FDR type for sure. And this is another thing. Me at 25 was like the only valid, well, actually, I don't have politics, so never mind. I'm not going to say what I thought at 25. At 25, I just thought, what is a politic? Who is a politic and where is a politic? So there you go. But I don't know. I think she's an interesting person, and it's fun to talk to interesting people. I want to talk to more interesting people. I mean, that's like last week we had Skylar on. Skylar's an interesting person. Fun to talk to Skylar.
Yeah, we had Jackson the week before that. I've been enjoying having these guests on.
Yeah, I recently reached out. Oh, thank you, Meta. There's a writer and a scholar from New York that has a new book coming out that I reached out to via social media who might come on. I think I still got to follow up with Alice Capel to come on and talk about her book Collapse Feminism. So, you know, want to try to get more people on here just to talk to them. But when we have people on here, it's not like they're on because we agree with everything they say. It's just interesting to talk to people. And that's all. Just interesting. Oh, yes. Well, Chris Maverick says, why do you keep sleeping on superstar special guest Michael Lux? Well, it's because Lux is like, he works for the company. You know what I mean? He's a company man. So there you go. We're going to wrap up a couple announcements on the way out the door for everyone. We're going to go into them next week, but we're backed up. Haven't read them all. Wisecracklive666@gmail.com. Shoot us an email if you want. I think that next week, guys, will be the last stream for a couple weeks. Pretty sure we're going to take maybe there's a world where like we hop on and do something short the first week of January, kind of like we did one of the holidays where I was in Chicago and we took a walk together. So maybe we'll do like a walk at some point if Henry's around and we can make it work. But so next week be here. Next week, oh yeah, we have a guest as well. This is like going to be confirmed, but Raymond Creamer, host of Show Me the Meaning, host of Cinemythology, filmmaker in his own right, is going to come back and we're going to do our top movies of the year. So, and I'm going to be honest, Dad Michael, because hypothetically I might have a kid. Who knows? I said that to Marianne Williamson. Like, I don't have a kid. I just have 14 dads and a half sister named Bari. But Catch up on movies if you can. I have not gotten to watch all of them. I'm gonna try to watch some more, but I'm pretty fucking behind, which sucks.
Oh, I'm dashing this week through. Yeah, I'm playing movie catch up.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit up Henry Rouse too. So we're gonna do a movie focused episode. We'll talk about some other stuff too, but that'll be fun. Another thing to let you guys know is starting the second week of January, we're gonna have a Monday stream, Monday morning at 9 a.m. What I want to call it is Wisecrack's Case of the Mondays. We'll see if that works. But what I want to do is I want the logo to be the main character from Office Space. So I want an Office Space themed thing. It'll be an hour long on Monday mornings, more of just like a checking in thing. As I'm saying all this, start dropping some what arias in the chat, kind of like we did with Marianne. Marianne's what arias are Bob Dylan, Ella Fitzgerald live in Berlin, and Tolstoy, specifically Anna Karenina. Let us know what you guys are reading, listening to, watching, all these sorts of things. God, I thought I had a new album I was listening to a lot this week that I was going to share, but now I forget. Oh, for anyone who likes hip hop music, there's a documentary on the group Little Brother that's on YouTube. I really recommend that. If you like hip hop music, even if you don't, you might still like it. So that would be something for me. Do you have anything you want to what are you
riding high off of Godzilla -1 still, and looking forward to The Boy and the Heron, which is probably going to be my next theatrical outing, the new Ghibli movie.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Whoa, Julia Cove saw Doja Cat Monday and Nicki Minaj in April. That's so fun. Okay, we got some good stuff coming through there. So yeah, 2024. Here's the plan. I'll let you all know now.
Empire State
Low numbers. We're just hanging out. Hey, Hickey, we're still checking the emails. Monday stream. Wednesday, we're still going to do this. We're going to try to get the patron only streams going on Fridays. Okay. The patron only streams. We're going to get that going. New No Name album ripped so hard. Logan Reese brought up. Also, the No Name Tiny Desk concert fucks really hard as well. Also, if you've not watched it, guys, the Juvenile Tiny Desk concert is like, if I had a religion, if Marianne was like, what's your religion, Michael? I would be like, it's the Juvenile Tiny Desk concert. That is my faith. That is my religion. That is what I believe in. That is my spiritual center. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. Also, just a reminder, when we start the second channel in the second quarter of next year, movie stuff, we're also going to have a movie stream. So there's a world where we're going to be streaming a lot in 2024. So we thank you all for being here, for being part of it. If you enjoyed this one, let us know and maybe share it. Maybe something we can do is like cut it so we have like the Marianne Williamson interview as like a separate video as well as we want it. But so good to see you all here. We'll be back next week. Oh, Mac Miller Tiny Desk was awesome. Tyler's awesome too. Basically, good rappers do good stuff there. But yeah, and I'll say this, if you're broke right now, you can wait and join the Patreon in 2024. We start the Patreon stream. But obviously, if you have the Patreon now, you go. Mita says, remember to lock the strong, guys. Like the stream. That was the longest. Oh, Sylvian SO was so good. It's the longest we've ever gone without saying like the stream. We were talking to Marianne. So there you go. Let's try to at least get some Satan vibes next week. If not, we'll get some Dome. Guys, I buzzed my head this morning because I was like, if it happens, I don't want to have the thing I almost said I shouldn't say. Self-restraint, guys. This is what it means to be older and take meds that help with emotional regulation. The thing I was going to say wasn't the best. So I'll leave you with this. Stay curious, stay fun, stay happy, stay friendly, eat snacks, exercise, get cardio. If you're feeling stressed out, take a long shower and remember to breathe. This has been Wisecrack Live on Wednesday, December 13th. Thank you to producer Henry. Thank you to producer Olivia. And thank you to Marianne Williamson. Okay, there we go. We'll see you next week. Love you guys. And I actually mean that. Bye.
See you next week, y'all. Bye.